State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. We say it almost every night during session, but it was another busy day in the Alabama legislature, and a consequential one. We'll start with an issue that has been dominating headlines for the last 3 weeks: in vitro fertilization and lawmakers' efforts to enact legal protections for clinics and patients in the wake of an Alabama Supreme Court ruling that says frozen embryos are to be considered children under the law. Tonight, the legislature gave final passage to Senate Bill 159, which offers limited liability protections to IVF providers and patients in order to allow treatments to resume without the threat of lawsuits. The House debated for less than an hour before voting to pass the bill. Debate centered around whether the legislature would need to come back later and address the more fundamental question of personhood. But this short-term IVF fix had a large bipartisan consensus.
In Alabama, we defined by law when life starts. And we've defined it by saying life starts at conception.
Where we defined it?
The abortion law.
No.
And every time...
Abortion law actually says in utero.
Same thing.
No.
Same thing.
Not at all.
And every time, and I guess the question has to be asked, what do you do with embryos that are not used or destroyed? And if we define when life started, then it seems to me that we are, some use the word abortion or aborting. I use killing. We kill embryos. And in the state of Alabama, that just doesn't seem right, because those who have the ability to participate in IVF measures, and then there are some that don't have the means to participate. So I'm just a little confused at this whole process, because it seems on one hand we're being quite hypocritical, but on the other hand, it's okay if you can afford it. That's just my opinion from House District 57.
This process has been fast, and there were weeks, a week ago, where it changed the bill every few minutes because we were trying to get the language as close to getting the clinics back open and satisfying all the different people. I think that we've been able to do that. I truly hope and believe that the clinics will open back, that this is going to provide the immunity that they need to continue doing the process with these families.
After House passage, the bill then went back upstairs to the Senate, where senators late tonight voted to concur for final passage. The IVF bill is being transmitted to the governor's desk, a process that sometimes takes a while. Governor Kay Ivey has said she is eager to sign IVF legislation as soon as possible to get clinics back operational again. Another major bill reaching the governor's desk tonight: school choice, and specifically education savings accounts. House Bill 129 from Representative Danny Garrett is known as the CHOOSE Act. It would allow parents as much as $7,000 a year in tax credits to go toward sending their child to a private school. $2,000 in credits would be offered to homeschool parents. The bill has been amended to put financial guardrails aimed to make sure it doesn't cost the Education Trust Fund. Still, Democrats remained opposed as the bill came to the Senate floor. After more than 3 hours of debate, it passed on a mostly party line vote.
At the end of the day, I believe we have a bill that is conservative in nature and is certainly sustainable in the education budget. This bill will add another choice to students across, and families and parents across the state, adding options to them that they can either take or not take. Because ultimately we need to be funding the students' education and focus on the students and not so much institutions. It's important that we provide to taxpayers who have children of school age various options and opportunities that they can avail themselves of and use to the best degree that they see fit.
We have ignored the fact of what we are doing to the students at hand. This is a situation where we are looking to provide money for people to take their kids anywhere they want to take them, as if we've taken care of all our other problems, and this is something additional we need to do to enhance our educational, lack of a better word, or choices or opportunity. But I think if you go back and if you look at the cry of all of our systems, how in the world can we think that we got extra money to give to some other new venture over here when we are not taking care of the present needs that we have right now?
The CHOOSE Act was written in close coordination with Governor Kay Ivey's office, and Ivey herself said the bill was her top legislative priority this year. We expect a signing ceremony as soon as tomorrow. Another step forward for a human trafficking bill we've reported on since the beginning of the session. House Bill 42 from Representative Donna Givens is dubbed the Sound of Freedom Act after the popular movie. It would set a minimum penalty for life in prison for anyone convicted of trafficking a minor. There was debate about the possible ramifications of the bill, but the Senate Judiciary Committee ultimately advanced it.
That person is going to be hauled off for life, just like the one who you really trying to get, who's actually doing it. And I realize that may be some situations that other person in there is that person. But you gotta let the judge hear all the facts and then say that, no, both of y'all is getting life, or this person is not. That's what concerns me about this amendment.
That knowingly subjecting them to that would have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt before they could be convicted and then be subject to the mandatory life sentence. Additionally to this section 2, they have to knowingly obtain, recruit, solicit, all those other things to cause a minor to engage in sexual servitude. So that knowingly on their part would have to be proven beyond reasonable doubt to a jury, and a jury would have to return that verdict of, yes, I believe this person knowingly did that, before they would be subject to this sentence.
That bill now goes to the full Senate. In the House Judiciary Committee, lawmakers considered legislation aimed at making sure Boy Scouts who suffered sexual abuse and trauma are able to be a part of national settlement funds. State Senator Marika Coleman is carrying Senate Bill 18, known as the Scouts Honor Bill.
Senate Bill 18 is not really new to this committee, except for the new members. I've had this bill several years and a different version of it, and we have Senate Bill 19, which is the larger version of being able to increase the statute of limitation to be able to help those survivors of child sex assault. This particular bill is specifically for those boys that had to endure trauma in the Boy Scouts. And so there is a National Boy Scout Trust Settlement Fund. If we don't pass this piece of legislation, the nearly 1,500 to 2,000 survivors in the state of Alabama won't have the opportunity to fully get the amount that they deserve through the fund. And so we're on a kind of a time, we have a really issue when it comes to time. We passed this bill unanimously in the Senate. Representative Simpson is going to handle it here in the House for me on the floor.
In the House General Fund Budget Committee, lawmakers considered legislation that would limit how much property taxes could increase due to property value appraisals. House Bill 73 from Representative Philip Pettis has been filed in response to multiple years of rising taxes due to drastic property value increases. However, some have raised concerns about the impact on local governments who generally regulate such matters. Pettis and Sonny Brassfield of the Association of County Commissions said conversations have progressed toward a compromise.
This is the bill we had the public hearing on last week. This bill, under existing law, there is no limit on increased assessed value of real property. This bill will provide for a cap on real property tax assessments under current conditions. And I think there's an amendment. We've been working, we're still working, and working with both, basically the League of Municipalities and the County Commission Association. We're still working, but we've agreed to go with it like it is, and before I bring it on the floor, we will have a agreement agreed upon. Yes.
Since we were together in this room a week ago today, we had meetings with the organizations representing education as well as the League of Municipalities to discuss some options. We then met on Monday with the bill sponsor and the Lieutenant Governor. We had a very productive meeting. This amendment is an outgrowth of that. We have another idea that I think the committee is aware of that might produce something that could be considered on the floor.
That bill was advanced by the committee and goes to the full House. Today was Cancer Action Day here at the State House. The American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network assembled patients, families, volunteers, and advocates to communicate their priorities to the governor and state lawmakers. Right at the top of that list is closing the health insurance coverage gap to give an estimated 220,000 Alabamians access to health care. I caught up with Jane Addams to ask what their message is to lawmakers and the governor.
This year, our advocates are talking about access to health care, ensuring that we close the coverage gap for hundreds of thousands of Alabamians who could get a cancer diagnosis this year.
Closing the coverage gap, a lot of people hear that and think expand Medicaid. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, Medicaid expansion is one way you can close the coverage gap. There's other possibilities. We're looking at All Health, the public-private partnership that would close the coverage gap but provide private health insurance to individuals. What we're really encouraging lawmakers to do is to read up on the information, to talk with leadership about it, and to push the governor to find a solution.
Some have mentioned cost as a barrier to expanding healthcare options for Alabamians. How do you answer when they say that to you? How do you answer that question?
Well, 41 other states have expanded Medicaid and closed their coverage gaps, and not a single one of those states has seen a budget crisis or had to increase taxes. So we know that this is a viable policy solution as far as state budgets go. We also know that the federal money that would come down if we expanded Medicaid is to the tune of $1 billion, which is nearly what we got in ARPA. So we're talking about a lot of money that would be influxed into our state. What we do with that money matters for how we pay for it long term. If we want to invest that money back into Medicaid to ensure that we are able to pay for closing the coverage gap for a long period of time, we can do that. So when lawmakers ask how do we pay for it, the real solution is right in front of them. They just have to take the step of closing the coverage gap first.
Also gathering at the State House today were disabled Alabamians and their advocates. Disability Advocacy Day is meant to raise awareness about the issues facing the disabled and their families, and to promote policies that support well-being for all. Speaking to the group, State Senator Linda Coleman Madison mentioned the issue of transportation.
I worked 7 years for public transportation in the city of Birmingham. And one of my jobs was working with our disabilities committee, our paratransit. So I understand how things connect, and I understand from a personal standpoint how this impacts the quality of lives of those persons who are disabled. You contribute so much to our economy. You have so many talents that you can give. But access to transportation and getting where you need to go and be treated equally like everybody else with equity and dignity is something that is very important. Thank you.
Another issue discussed was the process of testing and diagnosis, which some advocates say can be complicated due to regulations.
So our bill, House Bill 77, which has already passed the House unanimously, provides a timeline for the Department of Public Health. It gives them 3 years to add diseases to our screening panel, and then also requires them requires the Department of Health to provide an update on why diseases have not been added. Newborn screening is a way that we can ensure that these babies are given the best possible outcome of life. Through the program currently, even missing the 5 diseases, Alabama is able to discover 200 to 300 different babies via newborn screening for the diseases that we are testing for.
Coming up after the break, I'll sit down with State Senator Jabo Waggoner. He's the author of legislation aimed at allowing Birmingham Southern College to access a $30 million loan fund to help avoid insolvency. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
David Moniak was born near Pinchona Creek in present-day Montgomery County. He was of mixed Creek Indian and white ancestry and a grandnephew of Creek leader Alexander McGilvray. He was one of the earliest ethnic minorities to graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point and the first cadet appointed from Alabama. Moniak also had the distinction of being the only Native American commissioned as an officer during the Second Seminole War.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is the chairman of the Senate Rules Committee, Senator Jabo Waggoner. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be with you again, Todd.
Well, I wanted to have you on ever since last night. Y'all passed on the Senate floor your bill, Senate Bill 31, dealing with Birmingham Southern. This is the second year in a row that y'all have had this issue to deal with. Before we get into it, just walk through what this bill does and why it was necessary.
I initiated the first bill last session, 2023, and what it is, it's a $30 million loan to be administered. The original bill said it to be administered by the state treasurer. The bill passed like that last year. Had a big vote in the Senate, 32-0 last year. Then it went to the House, and there was a good huge majority vote in the House, and it passed, became law, and it went to the state treasurer to start his administration to administer the loan. Well, he refused, and it was disappointing, and really we were surprised that he did not take it on as the law had asked him to. So we've been in kind of limbo since then. Well, this session started, session of 2024. I reintroduced it where the loan would be administered by the Commission on Higher Education, the executive director of the Commission on Higher Education, who had agreed to administer the loan. Well, the bill came up yesterday, pretty lengthy debate, but it passed the Senate, had a good vote, I think 22 positive votes and 4 or 5 negative votes. So it became law in the Senate.
Well,
it passed the Senate. Now it goes over to the House, and I think in the next few days it'll be introduced and debated in the House. So it's a new bill, and it, as I said, it'd be administered by the Commission on Higher Education, and I think he has agreed to it.
Right.
So that's where we stand.
And yeah, because Treasurer Boozer basically said, look, you know, y'all put me in charge of this fund. I am the state's banker, and he treated it like a banking decision, saying, hey, they could never repay this loan. They're a credit risk and all that kind of thing. And is it fair to say that that decision went against the legislative intent? Y'all intended that money to be spent, and his decision was crossways with that?
Yes, I think it was. You know, I'm not sure it is a credit risk. You know, Birmingham Southern is a beautiful campus, probably 150 acres of real estate with some very expensive, beautiful campus buildings where the students from Birmingham Southern have attended for years. You know, the school is, 150 years old maybe? It's been there and it educated thousands of Alabama students. And yes, it has fallen on some difficult financial times.
Yeah, you mentioned on the floor that, we talked about this last year because I interviewed the president saying that they could face closure. You know, this is not just distressed. This is potentially life-threatening for the university.
It is, sure it is. But in my opinion, not Mr. Boozer's opinion, I think it's a good credit risk because of the real estate, you know, which is pledged as collateral to the loan. So, but that's his opinion, and of course I have one also, but that's where we stand. It's passed the Senate, the bill has passed the Senate, and it'll be debated in the House in the next few days. Representative David Faulkner is going to introduce and debate my bill that's over in the House of Representatives, so that's where we stand. I personally feel real good about it. I think the House will pass it. I think it'll be a statute on the books of the state of Alabama, and we'll go from there.
And they'll eventually get that very much needed loan.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about some of the critics and what they say, because there are folks that say, look, why are we taking public tax dollars, you know, that traditionally would go to public universities, public colleges, and everything? Because Birmingham Southern is a private institution.
Private institution.
What do you say to those critics who really have a problem with public tax dollars going to a private institution?
The state of Alabama has been funding private businesses and four-year institutions for years, you know, not big amounts, but Birmingham Southern has an economic impact of right at $100 million, about $96 million, as described by Dr. Daravi. He's the one that said Birmingham Southern has a huge economic impact for the state of Alabama. So it is a credit risk. I think everybody would acknowledge that, but to me, the real estate is worth lots of money.
So do you think you and your colleagues really just see this loan as a life preserver, right? As a lifeboat for the university, but in terms of what the state gets, it's more of an investment, saying this institution, you know, contributes not just to the city of Birmingham, not just to greater Birmingham area, but to the state of Alabama, and it's worth it. It's worth that investment of taxpayer dollars.
Sure it is. I've heard from hundreds of alumni, students, please, you know, pass this legislation. I had an uncle back in the 40s and 50s that was president of Birmingham Southern, Dr. George R. Stewart. My father went to Birmingham Southern. I finished at Birmingham Southern after going to Auburn for a couple of years. And I'm very close to that campus. I grew up on that side of town, west side of Birmingham, so I'm very familiar with the campus. Many of my friends went to Birmingham Southern, and I just have a real love, if you will, for Birmingham Southern College, and I'm trying my best to preserve that long-standing institution of higher learning in the city limits of Birmingham.
I think it's fair to say they appreciate you and what you're standing up here in the legislature to try to get done. We're certainly going to watch this legislation. Like you said, it passed the Senate. That was a big hurdle. Now the House will have their say. So we'll be watching. But Senator, thanks for coming on and explaining it for our audience.
Glad to, Todd.
All right. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
DeKalb County natives Charlie and Ira Loudermilk, better known as the Louvin Brothers, created some of the most impressive country music of the 1950s. In both their lyrical and musical approach, the Louvins helped forge a link between country music's rustic roots and its movement toward urban sophistication, influencing young singers in both the country and popular music genres with their intricate harmonies and stellar musicianship. The Louvins were as adept at writing and singing heart-wrenching songs like I Wish It Had Been a Dream as they were with humorous tunes like Cash on the Barrelhead. They received numerous honors, among them their induction into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1979, the Alabama Music Hall of Fame in 1991, and the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2001. As songwriters, singers, and musicians, the Louvin brothers excelled as all-out performers and rightfully remain lauded as country music legends.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at the same time with more coverage of the legislature right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.